Okay, so you're only hiring people that are not currently working? Oh no. Sure, we'll keep you out of trouble. But it can be such a game changer.
Ross, those are big words. Organizational
right? Forever, in perpetuity.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Aline, the co-author of the books Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors and The Best Known Roofer. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the leading digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I sit down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. If you haven't, hit the subscribe, leave us a comment, a review, all of that stuff, wherever you're watching, listening, whatever you're doing there. Follow us on all our social media, like our social media, if you want, or just listen in and hide in the background. It's okay too. Today, we got some good stuff for your business, for your roofing business. We have Rosalynn Verges in the house from Refinehry.
Yeah.
And Contractor Coach Pro.
Yes. Yep. Got to give a special nod to my friends at CCP sure.
That's right. So Rosalynn, for the people that don't know you in the roofing industry, or at least listening to this podcast, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I really am often just referred to as the HR coach, and really I've kind of become that in this industry. If you have questions on anything HR related, I'm typically the go-to for some coaching expertise. But I think sometimes in our industry, Jim, you know as well as I do, that HR kind of gets a bad rap. It's often thought about like, I don't need HR because I don't have a sexual harassment problem, or my employees love it here, so we're all good. And so I've loved just kind of coming in and help people in our industry reshape how they view HR. Really, we are talking about how do you get your team performance optimized? We're talking about strategic practices to help your employees stay with you, to attract incredible talent that want to be a part of your organization for the long run, and then how to get those people to a place where they feel like they have the highest level of potential with your organization and they're running on their full cylinders, right? Like just really making an impact in your business and loving it while they're doing it. So that's really more of where I focus than the policy stuff. Yeah. Sure, we'll keep you out of trouble, but I like to focus really on how do we get the best ROI for your company through your human resources.
Yeah, and that's I guess HR isn't looked at, it isn't thought of that way, but that's a core functionality of HR in larger corporations, right? Like at the Job Nimbus team, we have the PX team, the People Experience team. That's HR. It's not HR like what you would think of, right? Like they do.
It's not totally from the office, right?
Yeah, right? Like it's not now HR is there to keep you out of trouble, right? And make sure that you're complying with all your local employment laws and hiring and firing properly and doing all of your paperwork, properly. But boy, if creating or having, I'm not going to say having an HR department, but HR as a functionality of your business is what we love to the lovely coined term culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I think I think it can be really an important business partner, right? Just as important as your operations, just as important as your production and your finance and your sales team, because really HR is kind of like that hub that's, all of those different spokes end up touching in your business. And so if you can have a good partnership, whether it's having an HR team in your organization or just even having a good partnership with a good coach who understands how to bring some of these organizational design, development, efficiencies into your business, it can be
those are big
such a
words,
game changer.
Roz. Those are big words. Organizational design. Like, come on, we're in the roofing industry. What are you talking
Right.
about?
Okay. That's fair. So when I say organizational design, I love that, Jim. Thank you for the call out. When I say organizational design, what I'm talking about is what is the structure of your organization? What kind of people do you have? What kind of business model are you running? And who are the employees that you need to help make that model run? Thanks for the call out. You're right. I do. All right.
So all that HR language, Roz. It's like, here's like, so let's talk about that, because this is, I mean, every time we talk, we have like hour-long conversation that probably should just be recorded, right? Like it's crazy. So the last time we talked, we were talking about this in relation to strategically building your organization, right? What would you say? Strategic staffing or something like that? Like, I think that's how you would refer to it as, right? So it's, the way I look at it in simple terms, it's just being conscious of your organization and how you want to build it to reach the goals that you have. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some organizations, and I'm seeing a shift in our industry where the people who are succeeding, the people who are really thriving in their businesses, they are getting more planful, right? They're starting to think more strategically, more long-term, and actually starting to set some goals, right? What are our revenue goals for this year, for next year, for 3 to 5 years from now, right? And that's awesome. And we want to be doing that. And one of the things that I see sometimes missed in that process is thinking about it from our people resources. A lot of times we're thinking about the financials. What's that revenue goal going to be? And I love that. That's the starting place that we need. That's why at Refinehry, it's finance and HR. Jen kind of starts that process, right? Of you got to have your finances in order for sure. But in order to grow those finances, if you are aware of what that takes from a staffing standpoint, the reality of actually hitting those goals, that's a game changer, right?
That is big. And I've had these conversations with so many of the sales coaches, right? And I think that I've gotten some good feedback there in terms of a lot of times I've heard from them, there's always a misalignment, or a lot of times there's a misalignment with a company revenue goal and the sales rep's revenue goals. So you have to add up all the sales rep revenue goals. And if they don't equal your company goal, you have a problem, right? You have a disconnect. But also in kind of what you're talking about, it's not just the sales reps that you're planning for. You have to plan for your office staff. You have to plan for your production. You have to plan for your job site supervisors, who you'll need, when you'll need, along the way, and at what revenue levels. And then when you're talking about Jen being able to display hey, when you hit this revenue level, you're good to hire this person, but you already have that person planned. Is that right? Like you're not
100%, Jim. Yes, it's taking a proactive approach instead of this reactive approach, right? I see that all the time. And I think what's really interesting that you're speaking to too, I was thinking about this morning, this idea of kind of being misaligned on goals. I see that so much. And I think you're 100% right. There's this, I see it in a couple areas. One is are your team members on board with those revenue goals? Do they want to be there? But then also I think about this idea of speed to break even and what is your plan? So, I see in our industry, a lot of times we think about a good rep, they're going to be maybe about $1 million, right? That's kind of what we're planning, just from a revenue goals standpoint. And that's great. But if you're thinking, hey, in 2023, I'm going to add 3 reps and each of those 3 reps is going to equal another $1 million. Well, the reality is typically in a first year rep, if they're lucky, they're pulling more like 6. So now if you take that misunderstanding of when that revenue impact actually happens, there's $1 million you've already missed right there. You're already $1 million off budget, just because you kind of maybe miss the mark a little bit on thinking about that speed to break even that your reps are going to have. So that's when I see happen all the time. And then it just even being that $1 million off, it's now all of a sudden we're kind of driving what happens we feel behind. right? And now we put the pressure on our people, and now they're not having a great experience because they're like trying to make up for this, right? And so it's just, I think it's super important to understand these factors that really are at play in being able to hit those realistic goals. And then when you're off, if you don't have kind of an accurate, realistic plan, what that really does to the rest of your team, to the motivation, to the excitement. I see a lot of teams that still make it, right? But then you kind of become this like the iron fist that, or you're just kind of that nervous Nelly, you know, hey, are we going to make it? Or I don't know. And if you can kind of be on the front end and have realistic goals, that's part of that proactive planning that can really just set yourself up for a lot more ease in your year too.
Yeah. And then, you know, if you're not if you overshoot your goals and overwork your team, now you have probably a retention problem from burnout. Like there's a lot of like, you got to find that middle ground, right? As you're going along. What are some what are some things that contractors can do to put together realistic goals for hiring and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the starting place is really understanding. I love that you said like understanding what your reps actually want to make and what they typically make, right? What is a realistic expectation for your existing team? And then as you're thinking about that next, those new people that you're going to bring on, being honest with yourself about how much time you're going to have to onboard those people well, how much time you're going to have to train them well in order to get them up to speed. Because if it takes longer than you anticipate for them to kind of be reaching those revenue goals, it's going to have an impact. So it's okay, right? It's okay if I know that yes, I would love for my reps to make $1 million my first year. But if the reality is they're going to pull closer to that 600, well, then I can now just kind of be a little more planful of maybe I need another rep, right? Yeah. So I think being realistic and honest with yourself and looking at the numbers. I mean, you have the history. I think I'm amazed at how much data we have and we collect as organizations that we just never even take the time to go back and review and say like, okay, what is an average for my 1 to 2 year people? Yeah. What's an average sale for, you know, my 3 to 4 year people? Take out your rock star, right? Everybody wants to believe they're like, oh, we can just get everybody up to that rock star.
Stars.
No,
it's easy. It's easy. It's real easy. Just get more rock stars.
Right. Let's get more rock stars. That's really easy. You're right. I mean, if you have a great culture, maybe, right? Yes. Maybe. But I think being a little more focused on what is more of the norm for your people and at what stage, where are kind of those predictable numbers that you've seen in the past?
What are some other numbers to look at that we probably have these numbers, but we're not looking at them? You talked about actual sales data versus goal data, right? What are some other data points that we can look at maybe as we're auditing kind of our needs for the future?
Yeah, for sure. I think one is you want to really be mindful of when you're thinking about, you know, your mix, right? Of how do you bring in sales? Are you a lead generating company where you're providing those for your people? Because if you are, and that's kind of your business model, there's not a lot of self-gen. You need to be aware then from a marketing side of things that as you add more reps, you now have more leads going out. And the reality is those new reps probably aren't going to have as much effectiveness at running those appointments as some of your old reps. So you can't really count on that same closing percentage for your new reps as you can for your old reps. And so, or your experienced seasoned reps, I should say. And so I would look at that, right? Break it into groups. So often we look at it kind of as a whole. Yeah. Like what's our overall closing percentage? And that's important, of course. But if you can start to look at, okay, what are my reps that are maybe in their first 2 years? What's a typical closing percentage for that group? That's actually going to give you a more realistic understanding of what to expect from these new hires that you're planning for adding to your team.
That's interesting. And then can you do that on the same, like on the production side too, right? Like a production manager with this amount of experience, you could expect them to have this type of workload.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say maybe not even on the production manager, maybe on the project manager side more, right? Yeah. Because your production manager is probably the person overseeing that team. But your people who are going out and actually working through, your field supervisors, your project managers, people who are managing your scheduling. Definitely. I think you can kind of see where is maybe some of their capacity level that you can expect from those newer people, because so often, again, we're thinking about when we're hiring people, we're looking at the effectiveness and the productivity and the capacity of people who have been in our organization for quite some time. And when we're looking at adding people, it's just that it takes time for people to get up to speed. And so if you can be kind of starting to assess your speed to break even is the term that we use in HR. That's, again, going to help you have more clarity, a more realistic picture of when the revenue impact, when the efficiency, the productivity impact is actually going to occur. So that timing becomes important.
I'm sure it's different from different positions, but in your experience, what is the speed to break even in in kind of those major roles in a roofing company?
Those major buckets. Yep. Yeah. I think generally I would think about it as the complexity of the role. Your complex roles are going to have longer speed to break even. What's interesting is like in the sales industry, the sales role, right? The sales vertical of our businesses, it's fair to say that it's going to take 6 months for your reps really to kind of be getting there and grooving. And yes, they're going to be out door knocking and selling and doing the activities well before that 6 months, right? But to get to a place where they're consistently generating, they're consistently producing the same result, right? That's where it typically is going to take your 6 months, sometimes even up to a year for some of those reps to really feel confident in themselves and their skills and to get to a place where their numbers are more predictable.
Yeah.
And they've kind of evened out, right? Your production people, again, I think it depends on the task complexity that you're going to have with those people. So if they're doing jobs that are a little more simple, your speed to break even is going to be shorter. Same with your admin staff. If they're doing something that it's answering the phones, it's some of that consistent work, routine work. It's not going to take as long. If I'm doing the same job over and over again, pretty simple, right? I can kind of get through it pretty quickly. If there's a lot of dynamics coming in and it's changing all the time, or I work for an owner who changes course a lot, right?
No way.
One day we're doing this next day we're doing this.
There's always a direct line forward. There is no changing ever.
No, we don't do any pivots. And it's okay to pivot. Don't hear me wrong on that at all. But I do see that. So there are some of us in the industry that are a little more, we get kind of that shiny object syndrome. And we just have to understand that might be a quality that we have as a leader that is definitely having an impact on our team, our new members' ability to reach that speed to break even.
Yeah, for sure. And those are things to consider. Like I'm not in the roofing industry, but I talk about it on the agency side. And I heard this as a simple metric, right? Like if you can hire someone and pay for them in 60 to 90 days, like really in 90 days, right? If you can pay their salary, monthly salary and benefits and everything in 90 days, and if you need help, hire them now. Right. Because if you believe that that will free up enough time to add the revenue to pay for them. Right. And so, and as roofer marketers grew, we started going, oh, well, we want more time. We're going to make a bigger upfront investment in our team members. We're not going to just go, hey, you're here today. Here's everything, go to work, right? Like that doesn't create a good customer experience, right? And so a lot of times, in my mind, we hire too late because we didn't plan for that position. Does that, what tips, like, what are we looking at? How do we forecast that? How do we determine, that long-term planning, and then being able to go, okay, this position, I think this position needs 60 days of training to get them up to speed. We need to hire them 60 days prior to when we need them. And we need, so what's that path look like for companies, or what should they be thinking of? How do they plan that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Jim. Thank you. Yes. I think really you want to just be doing exactly what you're kind of talking about, which is what I think of as like working the math backward. Right? If I kind of know that a typical admin coming into my industry, they're going to take, let's say it takes typically about 60 days for them to get fully up to speed and rocking in their role, right? So now I'm planning on those 60 days. When do I need this person up to speed? Let's say I'm planning to add 4 new reps in April. Well, as soon as those reps are kind of really rocking and churning, maybe that takes a couple of months. So, okay, we got April, May. By June, I really need that admin person at their full speed, right? So now I'm taking it backward. If I know June, okay, it's going to take that 60 days, then I'm back at May with, over here, April. What did I say? April there. Yep. Okay, now that's when I need them on board. If I think that I can just snap my fingers and I've got that admin coming in, that's not very realistic, right? And again, I love our hopeful, wishful hearts in this industry. I talk to people all the time, when I'm doing coaching, hey, how long is your speed to hire? Speed to hire. Oh, about 2 weeks. Oh, okay. So you're only hiring people that are not currently working? Oh, no. Oh, okay. Well, don't they give a 2 weeks notice typically? Oh, yeah, sometimes longer. Okay. So now before you're even like your offer point needs to be at least 2 weeks before that person's coming in, let alone your time to review resumes, your time to post the job, your time to interview. If you didn't if you had kind of a bad applicant pool to repost, try again. There's some time here that we need to be accounting for. And Jim, one of the questions I get a lot though in clients that I work with is, okay, Roz, yeah, that makes a ton of sense, but what do I do? Because I don't want to start talking to this person, in January when I need them in May. And my question is always kind of, why not?
Why not?
Those right people, right. It's like you're courting them, right? You have this opportunity to really take your time and find those right people. And if they're the right fit for your organization, you don't have to be afraid that you're dangling an offer too soon for them, right? You just think about it instead as like you get all of this time to really assess and understand, is this person going to be the right fit? Is this person going to, like it here with our team? One of the things I recommend to clients, and that I think is just a really great way to kind of add this different element to the interview process, is to invite them to your company events. If you have somebody that you have kind of like in your gem folder, right? Like, oh, I would love to have this person, this person, this person on my team. You got to think about it like baseball players, right? Recruiters go out, they're scouting well before the season. They don't start scouting like, oh, we're playing tomorrow at spring training, so I better get out there and scout.
There's probably scouts at your kids' little league, Roz. with your kids. Maybe only watching your kids, but like...
Yeah. Somebody's definitely checking out LinkedIn to see that swing. For sure.
But that's a good point. That's the thing.
They don't wait.
Building the bench. It's how I heard it. I've heard it phrased that way. It's building your bench.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's a great book that I read called Who by Jeff Smart. I don't know if you're familiar with it or if you've seen it around, but that's kind of one of his kind of concepts in there too. Is like, are you recruiting or hiring? Two different things, right? Like both result in a hiring, but if you're recruiting, you're starting to put those feelers out there long before, right? It's time.
Right. Well, and Jim, there are some positions in our organization that we should always be recruiting for. Always.
Yep.
And again, this is where if we're doing the strategic staffing and we're planful, we know what those spots are that we need. Do we need a third baseman? Do we need a new pitcher? Right? Like if we have that plan ahead of time, we can be on the lookout for those people. So when I run into that awesome person who like blew me away with their customer service at dinner the other night, like I'm tapping into her and saying, hey, do you want to come out to our company picnic next week? Just come.
Yeah.
Come on out, right? You get into this business of entertaining and bringing people in just like we would with our customers, right? Just like we would with our vendors, our supplier partners, these relationships that we want to have long-term, we invest in them, right? So why do we not take the same approach with our internal teams that we're trying to build?
I talk about that. I started talking about that a lot recently because everyone talks about marketing in terms, from our perspective, it's like marketing. They only want, they're only speaking about marketing to new prospective customers. But I really believe that there's 4 places that you need to be marketing at all times. One is for those new prospective customers. The second is to your current database, like continue to market to them. The third is to your current employees. That company picnic is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That trip to Topgolf with the team is marketing. Taking everyone down to one of the, the roofing process conference or RoofCon or IRE or something, that's marketing. That's that you're marketing. And then you want to be marketing to future employees. Because if they see, like if they get invited to the picnic, that's nice. But what if they just see the picnic on the social media feed and they see that they're rewarding of their, very rewarding of their employees, their employee focused content on their social media, our team member of the week, and they did, and our wins and this is the stuff around the office and how we're having fun. And like, that's marketing for future people to work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, I'm sure this is why you and I always we get together. We can just talk and talk. I mean, I've literally done a talk on for Disrupt HR called "Is Marketing the New HR?" Because I think your communication, there's so much we can take from sales and marketing and turn that lens internally and market toward our current employees and those prospective employees. And I mean, I'm sure you hear this all the time. People are always complaining about content, like, oh, I got to create new content. Well, hey, here's a whole, you've just given 2 areas that you can up your content game, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So now, in this, let's kind of transition a little bit from, okay, we're planning up front. So we're looking at the numbers. We're looking who we need at that point in time. So an org chart would probably be an essential part of this exercise. Forecasted P&Ls might be an essential exercise, tool for this exercise. What else would be, what other tools would they need to sit down and take a look at those things?
Sure, absolutely. 2 really core ones come to my mind that I do with a lot of my clients. One is role mapping, having an understanding of what are the different needs in your organization and who's responsible for them now. Where are we going to maybe map out some of those in the future, right? So we are running our businesses. Typically, if we're doing it well, we're running under a continuous process, right? There's consistency in how we're approaching our business. And the reality is, even as you scale, a lot of those things are going to stay the same. But what's going to happen through your stages of growth as an organization is you'll typically start to become more specialized, right? So we see it in those, you might be in that all hands on deck stage, right? Where it's, you've got some friends and family who are coming in and everybody's helping and everybody's wearing a lot of hats, and that's great. And as you grow, it typically what happens is you start to bring in more people, typically outside of your immediate circle. Now we're actually doing job ads. We're hiring people that we don't know, right? So we need some good hiring practices, obviously, from that standpoint. But we can talk about that in another podcast, right? But now people are starting to get more focused in on specific tasks and specific roles. the reality is though, like the big picture of what we're doing hasn't really changed. It's just who's doing it, who's responsible. And where we can kind of assign ownership. So that's what we're looking at from a scale side of things. So role mapping is an incredible tool to really do that exercise. And the other one that Jen and I love to do with our clients too is an employee cost analysis. So through an employee cost analysis, we're looking at what are the expected costs, because it's never just the salary, right? We want to be able to invest. What's the leadership training we're going to do? What kind of fun picnics and company events and training and development that we're going to invest in our people. We want to budget for that. And then we can compare that to our gross profit so that we know from a revenue standpoint, what do we need to make up from on the revenue side in order to cover the cost of this employee. And honestly, from that side, sometimes when I talk about all those extra costs, it feels like, oh, I can never afford this person to help take something off. But honestly, Jim, when I do that exercise with clients, more of what I see is people saying, oh, what a relief. Like now I actually know what this is going to cost me. And I know I can actually afford that person. So it creates this really like freeing approach as a leader, because you can plan. You can actually say like, oh yeah, we can do that.
Sometimes you need
one sale.
Yeah, sometimes you need that outside person telling you that. I coach agency owners, and I've had a couple that come to me that are wildly profitable and wondering if they can hire, and I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
Please do. I'm amazed that you made it this far.
You are working 80-hour weeks and you are wildly profitable, but now, you have plenty of room to allocate those resources in a much better way.
Yes. Jim, that reminds me of a phrase that a dear friend of mine said that I've just like tucked in my back pocket because I love it so much. She told me once this term of act your wage. And I just think that's such a powerful mindset for us to have, right? Is like, are the people in our organizations, are they acting their wage, right? Because if I'm an owner and I'm expecting to, or even my GM, right, or my production manager, if they're out running supplies, right, or picking things up that like, we all kind of have this like in the trenches mindset, I got to show my people that I'm with them. And sure, every now and then, I'm fine with that, right? But if on a consistent basis, you're doing things that you should be paying somebody, $20 an hour instead of $75 an hour to go and do that same task, like we have to be acting our wage. And if we keep that in mind, I think that really helps us from an employee cost analysis and hiring standpoint too.
Yeah, for sure. Now we're getting people hired at the right time. Right? When we need them, when we can afford them, when we're with the right goals in mind, on path to hit our goals. But now those people need paths to hit their goals. And I think this is overlooked a lot, right? That it's, we hire someone to do admin work, but do they want to do that for 30 years with you? Right? Like, what is their path? And I think you had mentioned it earlier, like in the introduction that you were talking about, like, where's the upside? What's the potential for them within your organization? How do we put that into place?
Absolutely. I think that, again, it starts with kind of that strategic plan. But once we have that strategic plan, we now do start to have, like we talked about that bench, right? Who am I going to need? If we can be thinking about who am I going to need in terms of who do I have now to develop into those positions, that saves us so much money. It gives us a ton of employee retention because we can start to paint the picture for our existing people. And so one of the practices we do in HR from that side of things is what's called career mapping or career tracks, career paths, right? Where we're actually looking at what are the different roles in our organization. What are we going to need in, 3 to 5 years? And which of these roles feed really well into these predicted positions, right? If I know that, hey, one of the opportunities I'm going to have on a sales side is I know I don't necessarily need 12 sales managers, but I need some sales trainers, some sales leaders, a team lead, so to speak, right? Who can I start to look at in my team right now and start to foster and develop some of those training and leadership skills in them here today because I see that potential in them. One of the biggest pieces that I think sometimes people miss with career mapping too is starting to map out what are the expectations to move from one level to the next. And I think that becomes really important because if you don't understand what it takes to go from here to there, your employees aren't going to see the path for themselves. And again, that's that proactive versus reactive. It's like, okay, I'm going to promote this person, but I didn't take time to think about what the expectations were going to be. So I never helped them to meet those expectations before they got to that level up, right? We're just trial and error. We're going to put you in there and hope for the best.
What is an example of a role in some of the expectations?
In which pick a role, pick a field.
Go ahead, pick a role.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So if I were saying, let's just take that sales career track, right? If I were to say, okay, I've got this great salesperson, and maybe we want to move them into like a sales leadership role. So what's interesting, right, is that sales leadership role, there might actually be multiple avenues that we could come at from that. There might be an amazing customer service side that actually becomes a good funnel for those sales positions, right? There might be a production side that becomes a good funnel for that sales position if I know what the expectations are, right? So, for example, in a sales leadership position, I might not necessarily need someone that's amazing at sales. A lot of times we think like, oh, we want to put our best person who's in sales into a sales leadership position. But the reality is the skills required to lead people are different than the skills required to go out and sell and knock doors and get into a home, right? So we need to be thinking about what are the specific skills, knowledge, and abilities. KSAs are often, knowledge, skills, abilities in that role to make it function. So for example, in a leadership role, I'd be expecting somebody that is organized, somebody that's empathetic, somebody that's a really good communicator, right? Somebody that's probably not very selfish because typically we want our leaders to be people that love to let other people shine, love to let them take the front, podium and be up there. And they're the ones that are like more like, ooh, I like to be second chair, right? I like to be kind of behind the scenes. You take all the glory, you take all the shine. Those are the people that I'm looking for in a leadership position, right? I might also be thinking about how well does this person embody our culture and core values? Of course, I better be thinking about that from the HR side of things, right? I also might be thinking about how well do they pay attention to our organizational goals, strategies, processes? Like, do they like to follow kind of what we've laid out? Because we want leaders that are going to help reinforce these processes that we've taken a lot of time to develop and put in place. And so we want people who are organizational thinkers. They're not leaders for themselves. They're leaders for the organization, right?
Would you pick people along the way that you think like, as let's from your team, you're like, ooh, we're going to need this sales manager role, in 6 months, 9 months, next year, whatever it is, right? So you're starting to scout talent here. Would you express to the team or maybe just express to those specific people that you're thinking of, hey, you're here now, but if, we're going to have this path open up here in the future, here are the expectations that we want. Would that be would we want to do that? Would we, hey, kind of, it's the old, do the job you want, not the job you have, right? Do you tell them, hey, do some of this job, show me these traits and things like that in you, and we'll have this position in the future. Is that something that you can express? And then would you formally express that also through your organization, as you're developing your role mapping and your positions of, not just a job description, but expectations to get, is there a formal way of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where having a good career map helps show those tracks, right, that are available to people. And so absolutely, if you have somebody in mind, start developing those conversations early, right? Start coaching and bringing that person in, test them before they're getting into that position, right? And again, having those expectations, it really helps us to be able to identify where we need to develop those people. If I have a clear, okay, in order to be in this position that I see you in someday, this is the matrix for what that looks like. And I can kind of go through and circle, okay, I see you just green, 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 green here. Here's maybe an orange and here's a yellow. Let's work on these orange and yellow areas. So now our training and development for these people becomes very targeted and specific instead of this go to that seminar and we'll see how you do, and just, I call that transactional talent development versus transformational leadership development, which is where we're creating mindful plans for our team based on the needs that they have. And we're actually helping them grow into those positions.
One of my coaches always says that what you focus on expands, right? So if you just put some focus into these things, right? Even if it's just 20% focus, it's going to expand. Sure. If you put 80% focus or to 100% focus, you're going to see amazing results in this. And people is always the biggest problem in business. Yeah. Finding customers is not the biggest problem. Nothing is a problem as big as good people. Yeah. But a lot of times we're not thinking of it that way. It's just we just hire and go. And then we wonder, well, why aren't we finding good people that just do their job and want to work for me forever? And right? If some thought into this, plan it out, map it out. Plan your map, your role mapping, your path as you grow, and then do career mapping for your employees so that they can grow too. No one wants to do this, be stuck, right? No,
they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
one of the things, go ahead, Jim. I was just going to say, one of the things to think about this too, we've talked about leadership, but one thing I really like to help companies kind of wrap their brain around is this idea that elevation does not always have to look like people leadership. And you need to be mindful of that, because people leadership shouldn't be our only opportunity to have more salary, to have more responsibility, to have more agency in our organizations. So what I mean by this is, if you have people who are rock stars, but that they're just maybe not that right fit to lead people, because they are I want to be in the spotlight. I love being this bright, shining person in our organization, right? Those might be people that you tap into to take on some strategic projects, to take on more leadership from an organizational planning side of things, providing input, becoming the expert or the guru, right, in your organization, where they're a go-to for this knowledge and skills, but they're not necessarily the person that's going to be sitting down and having coaching conversations, right? But we need to be able to reward those behaviors in our organizations too, and be mapping paths for those individuals, because the reality is we only have so many leadership positions available. So instead, what is our plan for job enrichment for our folks, right? And then again, even to take it really another next level is, do you know what your people actually want?
Yeah.
If you're oh, I can't wait to promote this person and they're going to be this, and that same person is what I love most about my job is not being at work, because I love the flexibility that it affords me to go and be with my family. And I love to be able to take, time off all the time. But what you're offering them is more time commitment, more, more responsibility. And they're you're missing the mark now on this person that they're happy. And so now you're thinking you're offering something that's going to add job satisfaction. But for them, the feeling of that is, I don't know if I can stay here now.
Yeah. I have one of my favorite things. We run EOS in our business, and I'm a big fan of EOS, and it's the people analyzer, and you're analyzing them against your core values, plus, minus, minus. But then it's get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it, right? That want it question is what you were just talking about. Making sure that you have the conversations to know what your team wants. I have a cousin who's a programmer, and he has a degree in computer science and went into programming. And over the years, he's been a programmer. I got my degree in management of information systems, which is half computer science, half business administration. The way that the college explained it simply was, you start off as a programmer and then you become the manager of the programmers because you have the business side of your degree. And and this is, my cousin is a clear example of this. He's been a programmer for 20 something years now. And I've asked him at a lot of family events, like, why haven't you gone this way or that way? And he's like, because I like this. But he's a super senior level programmer, right? Software developer. But it's the path that he, like, in that understanding, right? That some people don't want this extra responsibility. They don't want to manage people. A lot of times that's the only roles that we look at, like you had mentioned. That's a good point. We're only looking at management style roles, leadership style roles as where people can get to. And in companies, that's the top, right? Like, there's very limited. And so then people don't see other paths to advance. And it's like, oh, well, there's I'm never getting there because so-and-so has been there and is going to be there for the rest of the,
right. Forever, in perpetuity.
Right. Yeah. So then their path with you, they make a decision without you knowing it most of the time, that this is not for me forever. Yeah. And maybe, when you go to the other side of it, to the earlier in the conversation, and why you should start building your bench and recruiting, is you want to find those people that maybe you have. Right. In their organization, they see that cap. In your organization, there may be room for them to grow, right? So,
yes, I love that call out. Yep. So, yes, for sure. Yep.
So we talked about, making sure you understand what resources you need, to, like, understanding your financials, understanding your role mapping, who you need, when you need them. We talked about the timing of when to and how to determine the timing a little bit. What other plans, or what other things do we need to consider as business owners around this topic?
Yeah, I think the last critical element is really the talent development piece of it, right? So we've talked about, okay, we've laid out some of those expectations. What is our actual plan to develop these individuals into these different paths? That's just an area that I see so many people desperately want that growth, that development in their roles. And it's just so scattered. I talked about that earlier, the transactional talent development, where it's like, go read this book, or go get this podcast, or go to this seminar and go to those trainings. And, Jim, those are great things. I'm not knocking that, but I equate this to, like, if I go play golf, right? And I go take some golf lessons, it is true that I go to those golf lessons, I'm going to be a better golfer. Absolutely. Right. I'm going to pick up some things. It's going to elevate my game. But let's say I want to go pro in golf. I want to be one of the best golfers there are, right? That path looks different. I need to be a part of a golf team we've got a training program, we've got a plan, we're meeting regularly. It's not once a month or here or there. It's like, this is a weekly habit practice that I'm going out to and participating in. And I'm doing it with others, right? I've got a team around me that I'm engaging in this with probably too, right? Maybe I'm doing some private lessons here and there, but I'm a part of a team. I'm a part of something bigger. And we together are trying to go pro, right? And so when you think about what you want for your people, if you just want to help them be better golfers, right? And it is just like, really, we're doing the best we can, go get some things. That's not bad. But if you really want to help your people elevate to a level where they feel like they are reaching their full potential in your organization, which just as you and I like to talk about, like good begets good, right? Them reaching their full potential equals you hitting those goals and you optimizing your profitability as well. So it's always nice when there's some win-win in these soft, fuzzy HR things we're talking about. The reality is that investment always breeds good results for our organization. It just does. And so if we want to take our people to pro level, we have to start thinking about our training and talent development in terms of what do these pro programs look like? What is a plan? It's not transactional, it's transformational. It's thought out, it's specific, it's strategic. It's looking at who are those right people to be a part of these programs because we had a staffing plan. It all starts back there, but that last tail of it is like bringing it into fruition, right? It's actually making it come to realization and actualization for our long-term success, not just this year or next year, but who do we really want to become in the next 3 to 5 years?
That's awesome. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Go to the description. There'll be a link to book a call with Rosalynn and Jen if you want to have a further conversation on how the Refinehry can help you in your finance and HR needs. Talk to you soon. If you would like to generate more revenue through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com to get a copy of the book, The Best Known Roofer. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. Thanks for listening.